to the next in our series of leadership webinars. Today's topic is influencing a team, where we're going to talk about the most critical skill that's required for success if you're working in a matrix or if you're a member of a cross-functional team. Everyone will be on mute, but we'll have some time for questions at the end of the session for those of you who would like to stay. My name is Rick Lupsinger. I will be your host and presenter for today's session. So we're going to talk about 4 key objectives. First is to talk about 4 influence behaviors that effective leaders use to build commitment among people who they don't have any direct authority and who may have competing priorities and competing goals. And as part of that, I'll share with you a little bit of the studies we've done related to the impact of gender and the extent to which that will determine and influence how people try to gain support and commitment and their overall approach. We'll also talk about which of the influence behaviors are most effective when working across cultures, and many times if you're in a matrix or you're in a cross-functional team, then you will be working in a multinational situation as well. And then finally, we'll talk about what you can do to build the foundation to be able to use influence effectively to gain buy-in and commitment to your ideas and your proposals. So what is influencing exactly? It's all about changing people's behavior, changing their opinion, their attitude, getting them to accept your point of view. But the key here is that you're doing it in a way that actually meets their needs, and you're doing it without coercion or without having people feel like they're being directed. And we'll talk about the key skills for making that happen. When we talk about possible outcomes, there are 3 outcomes of your influence attempt, and you can think of these as various degrees of success. So obviously on the bottom, resistance would mean that you were not successful, you were unable to change their mind and or change their behavior. Compliance is actually a satisfactory outcome. It's actually a very positive outcome. Compliance is where you've been able to change their behavior. They may not fully agree with you. They may not embrace your perspective or your proposal, but they are willing to do what you ask them to do. And they do it to standard and on time, right? Now, compliance is a desirable outcome, especially when the methodology or the standard operating procedures are well known and the deliverable is clear and well defined. The next level of outcome would be commitment. Commitment is when you've not only changed their behavior, but you've also changed their mind or their attitude or their opinion about your idea and or your proposal. Now, commitment is particularly important when the path to solution, the methodology, is not well defined, needs to be discovered, and or the deliverable also needs to be shaped and determined. Now, what's important here is to sort of target your outcome. We tend to overuse the word commitment. You know, I need your commitment, I want your commitment, but actually in many cases we don't need their commitment. What we really need is their compliance. And this is helpful because although you might like commitment, it may not always be possible to get. So it can help you calibrate your influence attempt and set expectations for what it is you actually want the person to do. Commitment enables, usually people will work without a lot of follow-up or your involvement. Compliance usually needs you to get involved a bit more. So here are 11 influence tactics, and this is based on about 30 years of research. A gentleman named Gary Uckel. We've been fortunate enough to participate with him on some of the studies. And this research, we tried to answer 2 questions. The first question was, what do effective leaders do when they try to gain commitment, gain support of other people, especially those over whom they have no direct authority? And the second part was, among these tactics, which of them have the strongest correlation, are most likely to produce commitment, that higher level of engagement. And in today's session, I'm going to focus on the top four, the ones that have the closest correlation to commitment: reasoning, inspiring, consulting, and collaborating. For those of you who are interested in reading a little bit more about all the tactics, you can get more information about them in my book, Closing the Execution Gap. And there's a chapter there on coordinating and collaborating, and we talk quite a bit about the influence tactics there. So before I talk about each one of them, we did that study around 12 different cultures to see the extent to which the influence tactics were being used. And the good news is that, in fact, they are being used, not just, it's not a US-centric model, but these tactics and behaviors are used in a wide range of countries. And you can see the countries that were involved in that study, and I will try to share with you a little bit about which ones are most effective in those various places. So for the first, in terms of the first tactic is reasoning. And reasoning is about using logical arguments, factual evidence to support your proposal. Not surprisingly, this is the most frequently used, and it's also seen as the most effective, but not just in North America, across the 12 cultures in our study. Even cultures that you might consider to be more focused on engagement or harmony also tend to see a rational proposal, a use of facts, to be highly effective. In addition to that, when we did our gender study, we found that this particular tactic is used about the same by men and women. So what does reasoning look like? It's about explaining why a requested task is necessary, explaining why a proposed change or a project will be cost effective, and it's about providing evidence that a proposed activity will in fact be successful. Now, some of you may be wondering, on occasion, you've presented what you consider to be a high impact rational argument. You built an elegant business case that was loaded with facts and data to support your proposal. Yet despite that, people did not change their mind. They didn't change their behavior. They didn't move with your request. And even though reasoning is used a great deal, there are two key factors that need to be in place in order for reasoning to be effective. The first is that goals are aligned. When goals are not aligned, you can be presenting a very elegant proposal supported with excellent data, but your reasoning is directed toward an outcome that they're not interested in. So no matter how great your argument is, it's not even pointed in the right direction. The second has to do with the extent to which you're seen as credible. Now, credibility has two components. One of them is your track record. Are you considered to be an expert? And this is important and relevant. But even more important is the extent to which people believe you speak the truth. Credibility, and a large component of credibility, is based on the extent to which people believe you are truthful. Do they believe you're giving a balanced picture of the issue or the situation? Or do they feel you're selectively disclosing information or putting a hyper spin on the positives to get them excited and enthusiastic and to buy in? So reasoning, and if you're going to be using reasoning, make sure goals are aligned and start to focus on developing your credibility. The second tactic is inspiring. Interestingly enough, this did not make the top 5 across cultures, and in general, it tends to be used less frequently by the general population. When we just look at the population of most effective managers, the frequency of inspiring increases fairly dramatically. And as you look at more senior managers, with those groups, the use of inspiring also tends to increase dramatically. This is all about appealing to someone's values and their ideals. In general, women tend to use this more than men do. And what inspiring is all about is describing a clear, engaging vision of the future, and making that presentation to arouse enthusiasm for a particular change, using a certain degree of energy and demonstrating your commitment. Now, when we talk about values, what we're focused on here are people's beliefs, things that embody what the organization or an individual stand for, and these beliefs are the basis for their behavior. So in this case, rather than laying out facts and data for why they should do something, you're connecting your proposal to their values. Things like work-life balance, fairness and equity, and even more concrete kinds of values like customer focus or efficiency. And that's really what you're doing when you're describing a clear vision. You're trying to connect with and hook onto their particular values. And this can also be done in a more personal, individual level. So the key here, though, is that you understand and have some sense of what the other person's values are and what motivates them. But in addition to that, it's also helpful to have a positive personal relationship, or at least have people think well of you, and to have high levels of trust. The third tactic is consulting. And this is the engaging participatory approach. Here you're collecting someone's input and their suggestions before you finalize your proposal. This was seen as effective across the 12 cultures that made the top 5. Women also tend to use this tactic significantly more than men. And consulting is about asking someone for their ideas to improve a preliminary plan. So you're bringing forward your idea as a tentative idea, letting them shape it, and you're also encouraging people to express any concerns they may have, and you're using that information to help revise or refine your proposal. Now, consulting is actually, when combined with any of the other influence tactics, is a very powerful combination, because this really does tend to increase people's buy-in and people's ownership of the final product. So conditions that help support the use of consulting: it's helpful if the person has information that you do not, so their input is valuable, worthwhile, and can improve decision quality. It's also helpful if you need their cooperation for implementation or execution in terms of increasing their ownership and buy-in. And maybe most critically, you have to be willing to and able to make changes. So if you're asking someone for their ideas and their suggestions, but you either really don't want to consider their idea, or you really are not able to make the changes, this influence tactic will not be effective for you at all. And the last is collaborating. Now here, collaborating means working together. But more than that, and to differentiate it from consulting, collaborating is working together to find a way to reduce the difficulty of complying, to make it easier for someone to do what you're asking them to do. This was seen as effective across the 12 cultures. It made the top 5, and men and women tend to use this about the same. So when you are collaborating in the sense of influence, you're offering to help the person do a task or do some of the work, or you're offering to provide resources that are needed to do the task. The key for collaborating is that you have these resources, you have the capability to be able to provide the help, and you're able to reduce the difficulty for one person without creating a new problem for them or for someone else. So for example, if you move a deadline to make it easier for someone to comply, the movement of that deadline will not create a problem for someone else on the team or for that person downstream. So let's talk a little bit about some of the similarities between men and women. There are 2 influence behaviors that men and women tend to use the same, and that's reasoning and collaborating. And here I'm only going to focus on the most effective, the 4 most effective. So reasoning and collaborating, men and women use about the same, both with bosses, direct reports, and with colleagues. But there are some differences. And one of the differences is with inspiring. Both men and women recognize that inspiring is less effective with bosses than it is with colleagues and direct reports. And it's not that you can't use inspiring with your boss, but generally it doesn't have the same kind of impact as when you're working with colleagues and direct reports in general. However, women seem to do a better job of leveraging the tactic with colleagues and direct reports. Men may not be taking full advantage of the tactic, meaning they may not be focusing their inspirational comments and connecting to values with colleagues and direct reports as frequently as women do. The other difference between men and women is around consulting. Both men and women rely on consulting when they're influencing colleagues. Men, however, may be missing opportunities to use the tactic with direct reports. So the focus tends to be on colleagues, but men don't think about it quite as much with direct reports and may use reasoning a bit more, more of a tell than an engaging piece. In addition to that, while women use consulting effectively with direct reports, they do tend to overuse the tactic with their bosses. And again, there may be several different reasons for this, but the idea of involving and engaging your boss around asking for their input and ideas to shape the outcome, women tend to use it more than men with the boss and may be overusing it or using it a bit too much. So let's talk a little bit about the foundation, some key tips for influencing effectively, and then we can make some time for questions if you like. The key to influencing is to lay the foundation for the effective use of the tactics well in advance. If you wait until the moment when you need to gain someone's support, change their mind, change their behavior, if you wait to start to put these factors in place, you may be much too late, and you would really extend the time that you need to be able to gain their support. So in every day, in all your interactions, you're focused on demonstrating credibility, building your track record. And again, credibility here is around speaking the truth as much as it is around your expertise. You want to make sure you've identified shared goals and common ground, built positive work relationships and established trust, and taking time to get to know the needs and values of other people. The key here is that you're trying to build a broader platform so that you can use a wider array of tactics and not be overly dependent on reasoning. And that is one of the challenges that leaders face, is because reasoning is comfortable. It's sort of our go-to style preference. We use it a lot, and we use it almost in a knee-jerk sort of way. And the idea here is to bring the right tactic to the right situation, or to be able to combine influence tactics and not be overly reliant on one. So you're trying to build a broad platform that would allow you to use a number of different tactics. The other point to remember is that you influence people from their point of view, not your own. So it doesn't matter if you think some of the facts or data are compelling or relevant. And it doesn't matter if you think a particular value is in play or in operation. It only matters what the other person thinks. So even though you present an argument you think is compelling, that's really not the point. You're trying to present an argument they think is compelling. If you're expressing values that you believe in, that's a good start. But you also want to make sure that they resonate with the audience or the individuals you're talking to. I've mentioned about not being overly reliant on reasoning. And however, if you are going to use reasoning, you want to make sure that it's a high impact application. To do that, you want to not just communicate facts and features and data points, but you want to be sure to translate those facts and features into benefit statements. Don't make the other person do the work to try to figure out what's in it for them. Be clear and specific. In addition to that, by clearly stating the benefits, it also helps you both explain and determine which facts to use. Out of all the data you could present, why have you selected these 3 or 5 data points to support your argument? It's because they communicate some key benefit to the listener, right? So it's not just a random selection of data. And as I said, don't let them do all the work. Be specific. Now, when you're doing this, you can talk about general benefits, make more money, beat the competition. That's fine. There's really nothing wrong with that at all. However, if in fact you can be more targeted, more specific about benefits for this particular person, it makes your reasoning that much more powerful. Same with inspiring. You can talk about broad, general sort of mom and apple pie kinds of values, the greater good. But if I can really target values I know you believe in and hold dear that drive your behavior, I can be that much more effective, that much more powerful. And the last point is around make influencing a conversation. Increase the use of active listening, paraphrasing, empathizing, the use of questions. Many of us see influencing as a one-way, I will tell you why you should, you will hear it, and then decide to change your mind or change your behavior. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually work that way, and it seldom works that way, even when you're the boss. The key here is to make influencing a dialogue and a conversation. As a matter of fact, even though it's a bit counterintuitive, the less you talk, the more you listen, the better job you can do. The more you learn, the more you pick up about what the other person thinks, what the other person feels, what their objections are, the better job you can do of positioning your proposal, positioning your idea in a way that works for them. All right, so make it a conversation, make it more of a dialogue. All right, so we can make some time for questions in a few minutes, but if you're interested in more information on influencing and influencing with impact, you can get that in my book, Closing the Execution Gap, and you can also visit our website where we have a number of blogs on the topic of influencing specifically and on working effectively across organizational